question. Russell was silent for a long moment, his gaze returning to the stars. "Parts of it are true enough," he said finally. "I've done things I'm not proud of, been harder than I needed to be at times. But no, it's not the whole truth." "What is the whole truth, then?" she asked softly. He looked at her again, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Why do you want to know, Tabitha? Is this part of your mission to civilize me?" The question stung, partly because there was truth in it. "Perhaps at first," she admitted. "But now I just want to understand you." "Why? Because I—" She hesitated, unsure how to express the confused tangle of feelings she'd developed for this complex, contradictory man. "Because I care about what happens to you, to the children, to this place." Russell studied her face, as if searching for deception and finding none. "The whole truth," he said slowly, "is that I learned early that the world is a hard place that favors the strong and crushes the weak. I decided to be strong, whatever it took, but strength without purpose is just brutality. I've spent the last few years trying to find the right balance, being tough enough to survive in this country but not so hard that I lose sight of what matters." "And what matters to you?" Tabitha asked, drawn into his rare moment of openness. "Justice, loyalty, keeping my word." He paused, then added more quietly, "Protecting those who need it, like Emma and Billy." "Like Emma and Billy," he agreed. "They deserve better than to be pawns in Montgomery's social climbing." "You truly care for them," Tabitha observed. "They're the closest thing to family I've got," Russell admitted. "Watching them grow, teaching them, seeing them heal from their losses. It's given me a purpose I didn't know I was looking for." The raw honesty in his voice moved her deeply. This was the real Russell Blackburn, not the fearsome foreman who terrorized ranch hands and intimidated visitors, but a man of profound feeling who had found meaning in caring for two orphan children. "They love you too," she said softly. "Anyone can see that." "They need stability," he replied, his voice roughening. "A home where they're valued for who they are, not what they represent. That's why I can't let Montgomery send them away." "We won't let that happen," Tabitha said firmly, reaching out impulsively to touch his hand where it rested on the arm of his chair. "I promise you that." Russell looked down at her hand on his, then slowly turned his palm upward, engulfing her smaller hand in his calloused grip. "Thank you," he said simply. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, a tangible connection forming between them. Tabitha was acutely aware of the warmth of his skin against hers, the gentleness of his touch despite the strength she knew those hands possessed. Finally, reluctantly, Russell released her hand and stood. "It's late," he said, his voice gruff again. "You should get some rest." Tabitha rose as well, suddenly shy in his presence. "Yes, I suppose I should." He walked her to the door, maintaining a respectful distance now. At the threshold, he paused, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. "Good night, Tabitha," he said, his deep voice caressing her name. "Good night, Russell," she replied softly. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Tabitha knew with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Russell Blackburn, the meanest cowboy in Texas, who wasn't so mean after all. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating, because of the depth of feeling he stirred in her. Terrifying, because she had no idea if he could ever return those feelings. For all his moments of openness, Russell remained a man accustomed to guarding his emotions, to keeping others at a distance. And she was still, in many ways, an outsider, a Boston schoolteacher temporarily transplanted to the Texas frontier. But as she prepared for bed, Tabitha found herself hoping, for the first time, that her position at the Montgomery ranch might become more than temporary. That she might find a permanent place here, under these vast Texas skies, alongside a man who was so much more than his fearsome reputation suggested. The next morning brought an unexpected development: the return of Silas Montgomery, a full week ahead of schedule. Tabitha was in the schoolroom with the children when she heard the commotion of his arrival. Through the window, she saw him dismount from his horse, his face set in grim lines as he snapped orders at the stable boy. "Is Uncle Silas angry?" Emma asked, peering around Tabitha to see out the window. "I'm not sure," Tabitha replied, though Montgomery's body language certainly suggested agitation. "Let's continue with our lesson. I'm sure if there's anything important, your uncle will let us know." But concentration was impossible after that. Even Billy, usually able to focus on subjects that interested him, kept glancing nervously at the door. After 30 minutes of diminishing returns, Tabitha decided to end formal lessons for the morning. "Why don't we go outside for some natural science observation?" she suggested, closing her book. "The butterfly chrysalises we've been monitoring should be ready to emerge soon." The children eagerly agreed, clearly relieved to escape the tense atmosphere of the house. As they gathered their specimen jars and notebooks, Tabitha heard raised voices from Montgomery's study. Though she couldn't make out the words, the tone was unmistakably angry, and one of the voices belonged to Russell. "They're arguing again," Emma whispered, her face troubled. "It's nothing for you to worry about," Tabitha assured her, though she felt a twist of anxiety herself. Adult disagreements happen sometimes. "Now, let's see about those butterflies." They spent the next hour in the garden, successfully witnessing the emergence of 2 monarch butterflies from their chrysalises, an event that temporarily distracted the children from the tension in the house. Tabitha was explaining the butterflies' migration patterns when she noticed Russell striding across the yard toward the stables, his face dark with anger. "Miss Vance," he called, altering his course to approach them. "A word, please." "Of course," she replied, heart sinking at his expression. "Children, continue your observations. I'll be right back." She moved a few paces away with Russell, keeping the children in sight but out of earshot. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. "Montgomery's back, as you've no doubt noticed," Russell said grimly. "He's received a letter from the headmaster of that school in San Antonio. They've agreed to take Emma and Billy at the start of next month." "Next month?" Tabitha exclaimed. "But that's barely 4 weeks away. I thought he was considering waiting until next year." "He was," Russell confirmed, "until you and I started advocating for the children to stay here. Now he's determined to send them away as soon as possible. Says they're becoming too attached to the wrong influences." "Meaning you," Tabitha said, understanding dawning. "And you," Russell added, meeting her gaze directly. "He doesn't appreciate your support of my position." Tabitha felt a cold knot of dread form in her stomach. "Is he dismissing me?" "Not yet," Russell said. "But he made it clear your continued employment depends on your cooperation with his plans for the children." "I see," she said quietly, glancing back at Emma and Billy, who were carefully releasing the newly emerged butterflies. The thought of them being sent away to a strict boarding school, separated from everything and everyone they loved, filled her with dismay. "What can we do?" Russell's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "You're willing to risk your position over this?" "Of course I am," Tabitha replied without hesitation. "Those children belong here with people who truly care for them. I won't be part of tearing them away from that." Something flickered in Russell's eyes: surprise, admiration, perhaps something deeper. "Thank you," he said simply. Then his expression turned thoughtful. "There might be a way. Montgomery's not their legal guardian, you know. He's not." This was news to Tabitha. "But I thought he's been acting as guardian, but the legal paperwork was never completed after their mother died." He was supposed to file with the court in San Antonio, but he's been putting it off. Russell lowered his voice further. Their fathers will named me as guardian if both parents died, with Montgomery as an alternative if I was unavailable. Montgomery conveniently forgot to mention that when he brought the children here. So legally, you have a stronger claim to guardianship than he does. If I can prove the contents of the will, yes. Problem is, Montgomery has the document, and he's not likely to produce it voluntarily. Tabitha's mind raced. There must be a copy somewhere, perhaps with the lawyer who drew it up, James Forrester, in San Antonio, Russell confirmed. But I can't leave the ranch right now, not with this rustling situation still unsettled. I could go, Tabitha offered impulsively. I could take the stage to San Antonio tomorrow, speak with Mr. Forrester, and be back within 3 days. Russell stared at her, clearly taken aback by the suggestion. You do that? I would, she said firmly. For the children, and... She hesitated, then added more softly, for you. Their eyes met, and something powerful passed between them, an acknowledgment of the bond that had formed, of the feelings neither had yet dared to name. After a long moment, Russell nodded. All right, but not alone. It's a hard journey, and San Antonio can be dangerous for a woman traveling by herself. He thought for a moment. Charlie can accompany you. He's young but reliable, and Montgomery won't question his absence as much as mine. What will we tell Mr. Montgomery about my sudden departure? The truth, partly, Russell said. That you need to purchase additional books and supplies for the children's education. He'll approve of anything that makes them more presentable for that fancy school. And when we return with a copy of the will, Russell's expression hardened. Then we'll confront him with legal representation if necessary. Montgomery cares about his reputation above all else. He won't risk a public legal battle he might lose. The plan was risky, but Tabitha couldn't see an alternative. Very well, I'll speak to Mrs. Garcia about preparing for the journey. Russell caught her arm gently as she turned to go. Tabitha, he said, his voice low and intense, thank you for this. I know it's asking a lot. It's the right thing to do, she replied simply. Then, feeling suddenly bold, she added, besides, I find I'm quite invested in staying here at the ranch, for various reasons. A slow smile spread across Russell's face, transforming his features despite the fading bruises. Is that so? It is, she confirmed, feeling her cheeks warm under his gaze. Well then, he said, releasing her arm but maintaining eye contact, I suppose we both have a stake in how this turns out. With that cryptic remark, he nodded toward the children and strode away toward the stables, leaving Tabitha to wonder exactly what he'd meant, and to hope it signified what she thought it might. That evening, she informed Montgomery of her plan to travel to San Antonio for educational supplies. To her relief, he not only approved but seemed pleased with her initiative. Excellent idea, Miss Vance, he said, stroking his mustache thoughtfully. The children should be well equipped when they begin at St. Mary's Academy. While you're there, perhaps you could call on Headmaster Phillips. I've written ahead to inform him of your role in preparing Emma and Billy for enrollment. Of course, Tabitha agreed smoothly, though the thought made her stomach churn. I'd be happy to meet with him. Good, good. Montgomery reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small pouch that clinked with coins. For your expenses, and a little extra for anything you might need personally. San Antonio has some fine shops. That's very generous, Mr. Montgomery, Tabitha said, accepting the money with a pang of guilt at her deception. Not at all. You've done well with the children despite some questionable influences. His expression cooled slightly. I trust you now understand my concerns about their becoming too attached to the ranch and its people. I understand your position, Tabitha replied carefully, though I still believe the children benefit from stability and familiar surroundings." Montgomery waved a dismissive hand. "Children are adaptable. Emma and Billy will thrive at St. Mary's once they adjust. The important thing is their future prospects." He fixed her with a direct look. "I'm counting on your support in this transition, Miss Vance. Their education at the ranch was always intended to be temporary." "As was my position here, I presume?" Tabitha couldn't help asking. "Not necessarily," Montgomery said, surprising her. "There could be a place for you in San Antonio if you wish it. The children will need a familiar face during their adjustment period." This was unexpected, an offer to continue her employment beyond the ranch. A month ago, Tabitha might have been tempted. Now, the thought of leaving Texas for a city position held no appeal whatsoever. "That's very kind," she said noncommittally. "I'll certainly consider it." "Do that," Montgomery said with a nod of dismissal. "The stage leaves at 8 tomorrow. Charlie will accompany you, as Blackburn suggested. A sensible precaution." So he knew of the arrangement with Charlie. Tabitha wondered what else Montgomery knew or suspected about her plans. The journey to San Antonio was long and uncomfortable, the stagecoach lurching over rutted roads beneath the merciless Texas sun. Charlie proved to be an attentive escort, ensuring Tabitha had water and shade at each stop, and keeping up a steady stream of cheerful conversation to pass the time. They reached the city late on the second day, checking into a modest hotel near the center of town. San Antonio was larger and more developed than Tabitha had expected, with substantial stone buildings, busy streets, and a surprising mix of cultures, American, Mexican, and German influences visible in the architecture, and heard in the languages being spoken around them. "We should find Mr. Forrester's office first thing in the morning," Tabitha told Charlie as they ate a simple dinner in the hotel dining room. "The sooner we can get the information we need, the sooner we can return to the ranch." Charlie nodded, though he looked a bit disappointed. "Thought you might want to see some of the city first. San Antonio's got interesting history, the Alamo and all that." "Perhaps if we have time afterward," Tabitha conceded, touched by his enthusiasm. "But our primary mission takes precedence." The next morning, they made their way to the law offices of Forrester and Wells, located in a handsome brick building on one of San Antonio's main streets. Tabitha had dressed carefully in her best traveling suit, hoping to make a favorable impression. James Forrester proved to be a dignified gentleman in his 60s, with silver hair and penetrating dark eyes that missed nothing. He listened attentively as Tabitha explained her position at the Montgomery Ranch and her concern for the children's welfare. "So you see, Mr. Forrester," she concluded, "we believe the children's fathers will name Mr. Blackburn as their guardian, but Mr. Montgomery has possession of the document and seems reluctant to acknowledge its provisions." Forrester steepled his fingers, regarding her thoughtfully. "Miss Vance, while I sympathize with your concerns, I must point out that I cannot simply disclose the contents of a client's will to anyone who asks. That would be a breach of professional ethics." Tabitha's heart sank. "I understand, but however," Forrester continued, "I can confirm or deny information that is already known to you. For instance, if you were to ask whether Captain Thomas Wallace did indeed name Russell Blackburn as guardian for his children in the event of both parents' deaths, I could answer that question." Tabitha exchanged a quick glance with Charlie, hope rising again. "Did Captain Wallace name Russell Blackburn as guardian for his children?" she asked directly. "He did," Forrester confirmed, with Silas Montgomery designated as an alternative guardian only if Mr. Blackburn was unable or unwilling to serve in that capacity. "And is there a copy of the will that Mr. Blackburn could obtain?" Charlie asked eagerly. The original is in Mr. Montgomery's possession as executor of the estate, Forrester replied. But yes, there is a copy in my files. And while I cannot give you that copy without proper legal authorization, I can tell you that if Mr. Blackburn were to petition the court for guardianship, citing the provisions of the will, I would be obligated to produce the copy as evidence. Tabitha felt a surge of relief. So if Mr. Blackburn comes to San Antonio and files a petition with the court, he would have a strong legal claim, Forrester confirmed. Captain Wallace was quite explicit about his wishes. He and Mr. Blackburn served together during the war and formed a deep bond of trust. The captain believed Mr. Blackburn would provide the kind of upbringing he wanted for his children, practical, honorable, and connected to the land. That's exactly what Mr. Blackburn wants for them, Tabitha said earnestly. He cares deeply for Emma and Billy. He's been teaching them ranching skills, but he also values their education. He just doesn't want them sent away to boarding school when they're still recovering from the loss of their parents. Forrester studied her with those penetrating eyes. You seem quite invested in this matter, Miss Vance. May I ask why? Beyond your professional concern as their governess, Tabitha hesitated, unsure how to answer. How could she explain the complex emotions that had led her to undertake this journey? Her growing love for the children, her belief in their need for stability, her deepening feelings for Russell, all were factors, but none fully captured her motivation. Because it's right, she said finally. Emma and Billy deserve to grow up in a home where they're truly loved for who they are, not what they represent. And Mr. Blackburn, for all his rough edges, loves those children as if they were his own. He would give his life for them without hesitation. Forrester nodded slowly. I believe you. And I think Captain Wallace would approve of your advocacy. He reached for a sheet of paper and began writing. I cannot give you the copy of the will, but I can provide a letter confirming its existence and general provisions. Mr. Blackburn can use this to initiate legal proceedings if necessary. Thank you, Tabitha said fervently. This will make all the difference. As they left the law office, letter safely tucked into Tabitha's reticule, Charlie grinned at her. That went better than expected. Should we celebrate by seeing a bit of San Antonio before we head back? Tabitha was tempted. The journey had been exhausting, and the thought of immediately boarding another stagecoach for the return trip was daunting. Besides, she had promised to purchase educational supplies to maintain their cover story. A few hours, she agreed. We can visit some bookshops for the supplies I promised Mr. Montgomery, perhaps see the Alamo briefly, and then catch the afternoon stage back. They spent a pleasant few hours exploring the city. Charlie proved to be a knowledgeable guide, having visited San Antonio several times before. They purchased books, paper, and other educational materials, visited the historic Alamo site, and even had time for a proper sit-down lunch before heading to the stagecoach station. The return journey seemed even longer than the outbound trip, Tabitha's mind racing with plans and concerns. How would Montgomery react when confronted with the truth about the guardianship? Would he fight Russell's claim? And what would this mean for her position at the ranch? By the time they arrived back at Montgomery Ranch, Tabitha was exhausted but determined. Charlie helped her down from the stage, handling their bags and purchases with care. Should I take these to the house, Miss Vance? He asked, nodding toward the parcels of books and supplies. Yes, please, she replied. And Charlie, thank you for your help. I couldn't have done this without you. He ducked his head, embarrassed by her gratitude. Just doing what Mr. Blackburn asked, miss. He's a good man even if he doesn't always show it. Yes, Tabitha agreed softly. I believe he is. As Charlie headed toward the house with their purchases, Tabitha made her way to the stables, guessing that Russell would be there at this time of day. She found him in the tack room, mending a bridle with the same careful attention he gave to all his work. He looked up as she entered, his expression immediately alert. "You're back. How did it go?" Tabitha closed the door behind her, ensuring their privacy. "We were successful. Mr. Forrester confirmed that Captain Wallace named you as guardian for Emma and Billy. He couldn't give us a copy of the will without proper legal authorization, but he provided a letter confirming its contents." She withdrew the letter from her reticule and handed it to him. "He said you can use this to petition the court for guardianship if necessary." Russell read the letter slowly, his expression unreadable. When he looked up, there was a fierce light in his eyes that took Tabitha's breath away. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "With this, I can fight for them legally, not just morally." "Mr. Forrester seemed to think you would have a strong case," Tabitha confirmed. "He said Captain Wallace was quite explicit about his wishes." Russell carefully folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket next to his heart. Thomas knew what he wanted for his children. A life connected to the land, to honest work, to values that matter. He looked directly at Tabitha. Not some fancy school where they'd learn to be ashamed of who they are and where they come from. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Confront Montgomery?" "Not yet," Russell said thoughtfully. "First, I need to speak with Judge Wilson in town. He's a fair man, respected in the county. If he supports my petition, Montgomery will have a harder time fighting it. And the children. Should we tell them what's happening?" Russell considered this. "Not the details, not yet, but perhaps. Perhaps we should prepare them for the possibility of change. Let them know that whatever happens, they won't be separated from the people who care about them." Tabitha nodded, relief washing over her. "I think that's wise." They've been anxious since Montgomery's return, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Russell studied her face, noting the signs of fatigue from the journey. "You look tired," he said, his voice softening. "You should rest." "I'm fine," she assured him, though in truth she was exhausted. "There's too much to do." "The rest can wait until tomorrow," Russell insisted gently. "You've done more than anyone could have expected, Tabitha. Taking this journey, securing this evidence, I won't forget it." The intensity in his voice, the way he said her name, sent a flutter through her chest. "I did it for the children," she said softly. "And for you." Russell took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you risk so much for me?" Tabitha met his gaze steadily, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Because I care about you, Russell. More than I should, perhaps, but I can't seem to help it." For a moment he stood perfectly still, his blue eyes searching hers. Then, with aching gentleness, he raised a hand to her cheek, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Tabitha," he said, her name a prayer on his lips, "you deserve better than a scarred, difficult man like me." "I deserve to choose for myself," she countered, leaning slightly into his touch. "And I choose you, difficult as you may be." A smile, rare and transformative, spread across his face. "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," she replied, smiling back. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Tabitha thought he might kiss her then, but instead Russell lowered his hand reluctantly. "Not here," he said, regret in his voice. "Not like this. You deserve better than a stolen moment in a tack room." Tabitha understood. Russell Blackburn was a man of honor despite his rough reputation. He wouldn't rush this, wouldn't treat her with anything less than complete respect. "I should go to the house," she said, though leaving was the last thing she wanted to do. "Montgomery will be expecting a report on my trip to San Antonio." Russell nodded. "Be careful what you say. Don't give him any reason to suspect our true purpose." "I won't," she promised. "What about you? When will you go to see Judge Wilson?" "Tomorrow," he decided. "The sooner we set this in motion, the better. Montgomery's been making arrangements for the children's departure. We need to act before he can send them away." With that understanding, they parted, Tabitha heading toward the main house while Russell returned to his work. But something fundamental had shifted between them, a mutual acknowledgement of feelings too powerful to ignore, a shared commitment to fight for the family they both cherished. As Tabitha approached the house, she saw Montgomery waiting on the porch, watching her with narrowed eyes. She wondered how long he'd been there, whether he'd seen her emerge from the stables, whether he suspected the true purpose of her journey. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and climbed the porch steps, ready to play her part in the deception a little longer. Soon, very soon, the truth would come out. And when it did, she would stand firmly beside Russell, whatever the consequences might be. Montgomery was waiting for her in the parlor, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a look of calculation on his face. As Tabitha entered, he gestured for her to take a seat. "Welcome back, Miss Vance," he said, his tone deceptively pleasant. "I trust your journey was productive." "Very," Tabitha replied with practiced calm. "I purchased several excellent books on history and mathematics, some quality paper and pencils, and maps of both Texas and the United States. Charlie is bringing everything in now." "Splendid," Montgomery said, though his eyes remained cold. "And did you call on Headmaster Phillips as I suggested?" Tabitha had prepared for this question. "I did, but unfortunately he was away at a conference in Austin. His secretary was most helpful, however, providing information about the school's curriculum and requirements." Montgomery nodded slowly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "A pity you missed him. Phillips is an excellent educator. The children will benefit greatly from his methods." He paused, then added casually, "I saw you coming from the stables just now, checking on your horse." So he had been watching. Tabitha maintained her composure with effort. "I was thanking Charlie for his assistance during the journey. He was most helpful." "Indeed. Charlie mentioned that you made an additional stop at a law office while in San Antonio." Montgomery's gaze sharpened. "Any particular reason for that?" Tabitha's heart lurched, but she kept her expression neutral. Charlie must have been questioned upon their arrival while she was still speaking with Russell. "Yes, actually, I was inquiring about having my teaching credentials formally recognized in Texas. If I'm to continue in education here, I thought it prudent to understand the legal requirements." It was a plausible explanation, and one that Montgomery couldn't easily disprove. He studied her face for a long moment, clearly searching for signs of deception. "A sensible precaution," he said finally, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Though perhaps premature, given the temporary nature of your position here." "One should always plan for the future, Mr. Montgomery," Tabitha replied evenly. "Even uncertain futures." He smiled thinly at that. "Quite so." Setting down his glass, he rose from his chair. "Well, I won't keep you from your rest after your journey. We can discuss the new educational materials tomorrow. The children will be pleased to see you. They've been quite despondent in your absence." "I've missed them too," Tabitha said honestly. "Good night, Mr. Montgomery." She escaped to her room with relief, certain that Montgomery suspected something but equally certain he couldn't prove it. For now, that would have to be enough. The next morning, Russell rode into town at first light to meet with Judge Wilson. Tabitha kept the children occupied with their regular lessons, though her mind was elsewhere, wondering how the meeting was progressing and what would happen when Russell returned. Her answer came shortly after midday, when the sound of approaching horses drew her and the children to the schoolroom window. Russell was returning, accompanied by an older man in a formal black coat whom Tabitha guessed must be Judge Wilson. A third rider, younger and carrying what looked like a leather document case, followed behind them. "Who's that with Mr. Blackburn?" Emma asked, pressing her face to the glass. "I'm not sure," Tabitha replied, though she had her suspicions. "Let's continue with our lesson, shall we?" But concentration was impossible now. Even Tabitha found her attention wandering as she listened for sounds from downstairs. Eventually, she heard Montgomery's voice raised in anger, followed by the deeper tones of Russell and another man, presumably Judge Wilson. "Miss Vance, Mrs. Garcia called from the doorway, her expression grave. "Your presence is requested in the study. The children are to remain here." "What's happening?" Billy demanded as Tabitha rose to comply. "Is Uncle Silas mad again?" "Everything will be fine," Tabitha assured him, hoping it was true. "Continue with your reading while I'm gone. I'll be back soon." The atmosphere in Montgomery's study was tense enough to cut with a knife. Montgomery stood behind his desk, his face flushed with anger. Russell stood opposite him, his stance relaxed but alert, like a gunfighter ready to draw. Between them sat Judge Wilson, a dignified man with iron gray hair and a calmly authoritative manner. The young man with the document case sat slightly apart, pen poised over paper, a court clerk, Tabitha realized, recording the proceedings. "Ah, Miss Vance," Montgomery said as she entered, his voice brittle with suppressed rage. "How convenient. Perhaps you'd care to explain your role in this underhanded scheme." Before Tabitha could respond, Judge Wilson raised a hand. "Let's maintain civility, Mr. Montgomery. Miss Vance, please take a seat. We're discussing a matter of legal guardianship for the minor children, Emma and William Wallace." Tabitha sat in the indicated chair, glancing at Russell, who gave her a slight nod of reassurance. "As I was explaining," the judge continued, "the will of Captain Thomas Wallace is quite clear. He named Russell Blackburn as guardian for his children in the event of both parents' deaths, with Silas Montgomery as alternate guardian only if Mr. Blackburn was unable or unwilling to serve." "A will that was never properly executed," Montgomery snapped. "The document wasn't filed with the court after my sister's death." "An oversight that we're correcting now," Judge Wilson replied mildly. "The will's validity isn't in question, Mr. Montgomery. Mr. Forrester has provided a certified copy, and his letter confirms that Captain Wallace was of sound mind when he made his wishes known." "This is absurd," Montgomery fumed. "Blackburn is a ranch foreman, not a suitable guardian for children of good family. He has no education, no social standing, no financial interest in the children's inheritance," Russell interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what concerns you, Montgomery? That you'll lose control of Thomas's land and investments if I become their guardian?" Montgomery's face reddened further. "How dare you imply—" "It's not an implication," Russell cut in. "It's the truth. You've been using the children's inheritance to expand your own holdings, thinking no one would challenge you, but Thomas was smarter than that. He knew exactly what kind of man you are, Judge Wilson," Tabitha interjected, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Perhaps we should focus on what's best for Emma and Billy. They've been through a tremendous loss, and what they need now is stability and love." The judge nodded. "Well said, Miss Vance. That is indeed the court's primary concern in matters of guardianship." He turned to Montgomery. "Mr. Montgomery, I understand you've made arrangements to send the children to boarding school in San Antonio. St. Mary's Academy is one of the finest educational institutions in Texas," Montgomery replied stiffly. "They would receive advantages there that they cannot possibly get on a ranch. And yet, by all accounts, they are thriving here," Judge Wilson observed. "Miss Vance," as their governess, what is your assessment of the children's well-being and educational progress? Tabitha took a deep breath, aware that her answer could be decisive. Emma and Billy are bright, curious children who are learning rapidly in their current environment. They excel in traditional subjects like reading and mathematics, but they're also gaining practical knowledge about ranching, nature, and self-reliance. Most importantly, they're happy here. They've formed strong attachments to the ranch and its people, particularly Mr. Blackburn. And you believe these attachments are beneficial to their development? The judge asked. Absolutely, Tabitha said firmly. After losing both parents, the children need consistent relationships with adults they trust. Mr. Blackburn has provided that stability and emotional support. He may not have formal education, but he teaches them values that no school can provide: honesty, hard work, compassion, responsibility. Montgomery made a dismissive noise. Blackburn is hardly a model of refined behavior. The man has a reputation for violence and profanity. Is that what you consider appropriate influence for impressionable children? Mr. Blackburn is exactly what those children need, Tabitha countered, anger giving her courage. A man who will put their welfare above all else, who understands their grief because he's experienced his own, who sees their potential and encourages it without trying to mold them into something they're not. She met Montgomery's gaze directly. And he loves them, Mr. Montgomery. Not for what they represent or what they might become, but for who they are right now. A heavy silence followed her impassioned defense. Russell was looking at her with an expression that made her heart race: admiration, gratitude, and something deeper, more personal. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. Well spoken, Miss Vance. Your perspective as someone who works closely with the children is valuable. He turned to the clerk. Make sure Miss Vance's testimony is recorded in full. This is outrageous, Montgomery sputtered. The governess is clearly biased. She and Blackburn have been conspiring behind my back. That's enough, Montgomery, Russell said quietly. This isn't about you or me. It's about Emma and Billy and what their father wanted for them. The judge nodded. Indeed. And having reviewed the evidence and heard testimony, I am inclined to uphold Captain Wallace's wishes. Mr. Blackburn appears to be providing appropriate care and education for the children, with Miss Vance's professional assistance. He fixed Montgomery with a stern look. Unless you can provide compelling evidence that Mr. Blackburn is unfit to serve as guardian, I will be granting his petition. Montgomery seemed to deflate, the anger draining from him to be replaced by calculation. And the financial arrangements, the children's inheritance, will be properly managed for their benefit with regular accounting to the court, Judge Wilson replied firmly. Captain Wallace's will establish a trust for that purpose, with you and Mr. Blackburn as co-trustees. That arrangement will stand. This seemed to mollify Montgomery somewhat. I see. And where will the children reside? This is my ranch, after all. I've purchased land, Russell said, surprising both Montgomery and Tabitha. The old Kendall place adjoining your north pasture, 500 acres, good water, solid house. The sale will be finalized next week. When did you? Tabitha began, astonished. Been saving for years, Russell explained, a hint of pride in his voice. Was going to tell you once it was official. Judge Wilson nodded approvingly. That resolves the matter of residence then. The children will live with Mr. Blackburn on his property, with continued access to educational resources. He turned to Tabitha. Miss Vance, would you be willing to continue as governess under these new arrangements? Tabitha felt a surge of joy so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Yes, Your Honor, I would be most willing. Excellent. Then, unless there are further objections. The judge looked at Montgomery, who pressed his lips together but remained silent. I will issue the formal guardianship decree tomorrow. Mr. Blackburn, I'll expect you in my office at 10 o'clock to sign the necessary papers." With that, the meeting concluded. Montgomery retreated into stony silence, refusing to look at either Russell or Tabitha as Judge Wilson and his clerk gathered their materials. Russell escorted the judge out, leaving Tabitha alone with Montgomery. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Montgomery raised his head, his expression coldly composed once more. "You surprise me, Miss Vance," he said at last. "I thought you were a woman of ambition." "I am," Tabitha replied calmly, "but my ambitions have changed since coming to Texas." A humorless smile twisted his mouth. "Clearly. Well, I won't stand in your way, but know this: you're choosing a difficult path. Russell Blackburn may seem romantic now, with his rough-hewn nobility and frontier mystique, but men like him don't change fundamentally. The meanness, the violence, the darkness that drives him, those things don't disappear because a woman thinks she can redeem them." Tabitha met his gaze steadily. "I'm not trying to change Russell, Mr. Montgomery. I value him for exactly who he is. Perhaps that's something you might consider: accepting people for who they are, not who you wish them to be." Montgomery's expression hardened. "You'll regret this decision, Miss Vance. Mark my words." "I don't think I will," she replied with quiet certainty. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I should return to the children. They'll be wondering what's happening." She left him there, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth and ambition, and felt nothing but relief as she climbed the stairs back to the schoolroom. A new future was taking shape, one she could scarcely have imagined when she first arrived at Montgomery Ranch. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the one her heart had chosen. Russell was waiting for her on the landing, his tall figure silhouetted against the window light. Without a word, he took her hand and led her into a small alcove where they wouldn't be observed. "You were magnificent in there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Standing up to Montgomery, defending me to the judge. I don't have words enough to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Tabitha replied softly. "I spoke the truth, nothing more. It was more than that, and you know it." His blue eyes, usually so guarded, were open now, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "You've seen the worst of me, Tabitha, my temper, my harshness, my stubborn pride. And yet you still believe in me. That's a gift I never expected to receive from anyone, least of all a refined Boston lady." Tabitha smiled at that. "I'm not so refined, Russell, and Boston seems very far away now. Do you miss it?" he asked, studying her face. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss certain things: libraries, concerts, the changing seasons. But I don't miss who I was there. I was incomplete, though I didn't know it until I came here." Russell's hand, large and calloused, gently cupped her cheek. "And now I feel as though I've found a part of myself I never knew was missing," she said honestly. "Here with the children, with you." His expression softened, the usual stern lines of his face relaxing into something that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Tabitha Vance," he said, her name a caress on his lips. "I never thought to find someone like you in this life. Never thought a woman of your quality would look twice at a man like me." "Then you underestimated us both," she replied, covering his hand with her own. For a moment, they stood like that, connected by touch and gaze, the air between them charged with possibility. Then, with exquisite gentleness, Russell lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers: a question, an offering, a promise. Tabitha answered by rising on tiptoe, her free hand finding the back of his neck as she returned his kiss with all the feeling that had been building in her heart these past weeks. It was a perfect moment, suspended in time, tender yet passionate, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally parted, Russell rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I should have done that weeks ago," he murmured. "Better late than never," she teased gently. He chuckled, the sound vibrating through her. "True enough." Reluctantly, he straightened. "We should tell the children what's happening. They deserve to know they won't be sent away." "Yes," Tabitha agreed. "They'll be overjoyed." Hand in hand, they walked toward the schoolroom, ready to share the news that would change all their lives. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Russell officially became Emma and Billy's legal guardian, with the paperwork signed and filed in Judge Wilson's court. Montgomery, though clearly displeased, maintained a cool civility, focusing on his business interests and spending most of his time away from the ranch. The purchase of the Kendall property was finalized, and Russell began the work of preparing it for habitation. The house, solid but neglected, needed considerable repair. The ranch hands, many of whom had grown fond of Emma and Billy, volunteered their free time to help with the renovations. Tabitha divided her time between continuing the children's education and assisting with plans for the move. She found herself unexpectedly excited by the prospect of creating a proper home, something she hadn't given much thought to in her previous life as a Boston schoolteacher. The children were thrilled by the developments. The knowledge that they would stay in Texas, with Russell as their guardian and Tabitha as their teacher, brought a new security and happiness to their young faces. They threw themselves into preparations for the move, offering opinions on everything from room arrangements to where the vegetable garden should be located. "Will you live with us at the new house, Miss Vance?" Emma asked one afternoon as they sorted through books to pack. Tabitha hesitated, uncertain how to answer. She and Russell had not discussed the precise arrangements beyond her continuing as governess. "I'll be your teacher, certainly," she replied carefully, "but the details haven't been settled yet." Emma gave her a look of surprising perception for a child of 8. "But you love Mr. Blackburn, don't you? And he loves you, we can tell." Tabitha felt her cheeks warm. "Relationships between adults are complicated, Emma." "They don't have to be," the girl said matter-of-factly. "If you love someone and they love you, you should be together. That's what my mama always said." Out of the mouths of babes, Tabitha thought. Your mama was a wise woman, but there are proper ways of doing things, especially when children are involved. Emma rolled her eyes in a manner decidedly unbecoming to a young lady. Grown-ups always make things harder than they need to be. Tabitha couldn't help laughing at that. "Perhaps you're right. Now, which books would you like to take to the new house?" That evening she found Russell on the porch, studying architectural drawings by lamplight. He looked up as she approached, his face softening in the way it did only for her. "The children are finally asleep," she reported, taking the seat beside him. "They're so excited about the move they could hardly settle down." "Can't blame them," Russell said, setting aside the drawings. "It's a big change, a good one, I hope." "The best," Tabitha assured him. "They're thrilled to be staying with you." Though Emma did ask a rather direct question about our arrangements, Russell raised an eyebrow. "Did she now? And what did you tell her?" "That the details hadn't been settled yet." Tabitha glanced at him sideways. "Which is true, isn't it?" He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a way that sent shivers up her arm. "Only because I wanted to be sure of your feelings before presuming anything." "I believe I've made my feelings quite clear, Mr. Blackburn," she said, trying for primness but failing as a smile crept onto her face. "You have it that, Miss Vance." His blue eyes held hers, serious now despite his light tone. "But there's a proper way to do things, as you've reminded me more than once during our acquaintance." With that, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, the kind that could hold only one thing. Tabitha's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring with a single pearl set in gold, simple but exquisite. "It was my mother's," Russell said, his voice suddenly rough with emotion. "The only thing of hers I managed to keep through all the years of wandering. I always thought I'd never have cause to give it to anyone." He took her hand again, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew those hands possessed. "Tabitha Vance, you came to Texas to tame the meanest cowboy in the state, and instead you taught him what it means to love. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and a mother to Emma and Billy?" Tears sprang to Tabitha's eyes, joy overwhelming her usual composure. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Russell, nothing would make me happier." He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit as if it had been made for her. Then he drew her to her feet and into his arms, his kiss a seal on their commitment, a promise of all that was to come. When they finally separated, both breathless, Russell rested his forehead against hers in the way she had come to love. "We'll have to wait a bit before we can marry," he said regretfully. "The house isn't ready yet, and there's much to do before winter." "I don't mind waiting a little while," Tabitha assured him. "As long as we're together, that's what matters." "Together," he repeated, the word a vow on his lips. "For always, Tabitha, that's my promise to you." As they stood there in the Texas twilight, arms around each other and hearts aligned, Tabitha reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come west expecting to civilize a brute, only to discover a man of depth and principle behind the fearsome reputation. A man who had awakened in her feelings she'd never imagined possible, who had shown her a kind of love that transcended backgrounds and expectations. Russell Blackburn might still be considered the meanest cowboy in Texas by those who didn't know him. But to Tabitha, to Emma and Billy, to the people who truly saw him, he was simply the best man they knew, honest, loyal, and capable of a love as vast as the Texas sky. The wedding took place on a clear October day, with the Texas hill country ablaze in autumn colors. They held the ceremony at the new house, which Russell had worked tirelessly to prepare. The simple white structure, set on a gentle rise overlooking a creek, had been transformed from a neglected homestead to a welcoming home, with fresh paint, repaired porches, and new curtains at the windows. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony, with Emma serving as Tabitha's maid of honor and Billy as Russell's best man. Mrs. Garcia, Charlie, and many of the ranch hands attended, along with neighbors from surrounding properties. Even Montgomery made an appearance, arriving late but bringing expensive gifts for the bride and groom, perhaps his way of extending an olive branch. Tabitha wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from San Antonio, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Russell, almost unrecognizable in a new black suit, stood tall and proud as he spoke his vows in a voice that carried across the assembled guests without hesitation or uncertainty. "I, Russell James Blackburn, take you, Tabitha Ann Vance, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parts us. This is my solemn vow." As Tabitha repeated the words, looking up into the face of the man who had captured her heart so unexpectedly, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, with this man, these children, this life. After the ceremony, there was a feast spread on tables under the oak trees, with music provided by some of the ranch hands who played fiddle and guitar. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Russell led Tabitha in a dance, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a large man. "Happy, Mrs. Blackburn?" he asked, holding her close as they moved to the music. "Completely, Mr. Blackburn," she replied, her heart so full it seemed it might overflow. "Though I'm still getting used to my new name." "It suits you," he said, his blue eyes warm with love. better than I deserve having you take my name." "I disagree," she said firmly. "I'm proud to be your wife, Russell, prouder than I can say." His arms tightened around her, and he bent to brush his lips against her forehead, a gesture of tenderness that still surprised her, coming from a man once known only for his harshness. "I love you, Tabitha, more than I have words to express." "I love you too," she whispered back. "With all my heart." As the music played on, and the Texas sunset painted the sky in glorious shades of gold and crimson, Tabitha looked around at the gathering Emma and Billy dancing together with more enthusiasm than skill. Mrs. Garcia directing the serving of food, Charlie and the other young men eyeing the local girls with hopeful expressions, Judge Wilson deep in conversation with neighboring ranchers. This was her family now, her community, her home. Not the life she had imagined when she left Boston, but infinitely better, richer, and more meaningful than anything she could have planned for herself. And at the center of it all was Russell, her husband, her partner, her love. The meanest cowboy in Texas, who had fallen to his knees for her in the most important way a man could. By opening his heart, embracing vulnerability, and choosing love over loneliness. As night fell and lanterns were lit around the yard, Russell drew her away from the celebration toward the porch of their new home. In the soft glow of lamplight, he took both her hands in his. "I've been thinking," he said, his expression serious, "about the future, about what we're building here." "What have you been thinking?" she asked, curious at his tone. "That I want to make this ranch something special, not just a place to raise cattle, but a home for children who need one." His eyes held hers, gauging her reaction. Children like Emma and Billy once were. Orphans of the war, or those who have lost their families to sickness or accident. There are too many such children being raised in institutions or bound out as servants when what they really need is family. Tabitha felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. This man, whom she had once been sent to civilize, possessed a depth of compassion that humbled her. "Russell, that's a wonderful idea," she said earnestly. "We have the land, the resources, the skills between us. We could give them education, practical training, and most importantly, love and security." The relief on his face told her he had been uncertain of her reaction. "You'd be willing to take on more children?" "Beyond Emma and Billy, more than willing," she assured him. "Eager, even. Teaching has always been my calling, but this would be something more meaningful, creating a true home for children who need it most." Russell gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. "Have I told you lately that you're remarkable, Tabitha Blackburn?" She smiled against his chest. "Not in the last hour or so." "A serious oversight on my part," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "One I intend to rectify thoroughly and regularly for the rest of our lives." "I'll hold you to that promise, Mr. Blackburn," she said, tilting her face up to his. As his lips met hers in a kiss that spoke of both passion and tenderness, Tabitha knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true purpose, and her true love not in the drawing rooms of Boston, but under the vast skies of Texas, with a man whose rough exterior had hidden the most remarkable heart she had ever known. Years later, the Blackburn Ranch became known throughout Texas, not just for its fine cattle and horses, but for its school that welcomed children who had nowhere else to go. Under Tabitha's guidance, the educational program flourished, combining traditional academics with practical skills that would serve the children well in whatever future they chose. Russell, once feared as the meanest cowboy in Texas, became respected as a fair and principled rancher who gave second chances to those society had discarded not just children, but adults too, hiring men others wouldn't consider and treating them with the respect that brought out their best. Emma and Billy grew into confident, capable young adults, secure in the knowledge that they were loved for exactly who they were. Emma, with her sharp mind and determined spirit, eventually attended university in Austin, her own choice, made when she was ready. Billy, who shared Russell's affinity for horses and land management, became his partner in running the ranch. And on quiet evenings, when the day's work was done and the children were settled, Tabitha and Russell would sit together on the porch of their home, hands linked as they watched the Texas sunset paint the sky with fire and gold. Did you ever imagine this life? Russell would sometimes ask, his voice soft with wonder even after all their years together. Never, Tabitha would reply honestly. But I can't imagine any other life now. This is where I was meant to be, with you, with our family under this endless Texas sky. And Russell, the man who had once guarded his heart behind walls of anger and distrust, would draw his wife close and thank whatever fate or providence had sent Tabitha Vance to tame the meanest cowboy in Texas, not by changing who he was, but by loving him enough to help him become the man he was always meant to be.